Do you remember this man in Titanic? Well, everything you know about him may be wrong.
Now row!
What's good, guys? Today I have a super exciting video to share with you guys because we have a very special guest on the channel. I'm going to be chatting with Simon Medhurst, who is the great-grandson of Quartermaster Robert Hichens.
I mean, the shut the hole in your face.
You don't shut that hole in your face!
Actually happened in Lifeboat 8.
Now, for those of you that don't know who Quartermaster Hichens is, he was the man who was at the helm of the Titanic when Titanic hit the iceberg.
You people want to live or do you want to die?
Yeah, he's not portrayed too favorably in the movies. So I wanted to chat with Simon to find out what is the true story of Quartermaster Hichens. And who better to tell us than a real-life relative? And it's his incredible story that I want to share with you guys today. Now, before we jump in, I want to thank all the new Titanic nerds that have recently subscribed to my channel. If you're not yet subscribed, here on my channel, we talk about the Titanic, disasters, and other historical events. So if you're into that, then this is probably the place for you. Please don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Alrighty, without further ado, let me introduce you to Mr. Simon Medhurst. Why don't we start with some introduction, Simon? Tell us, who is Simon Medhurst?
Well, I live in the UK, so I live in Essex. I brought up in London. I didn't know anything about the Titanic as such when I was growing up, and I didn't know anything about my relative until 2012. So that was exactly 100 years, which was quite a bit of a shock, really, because I didn't know who my birth father was. I had a picture, and I'll show you the picture so you've got that one. That's the picture I had of me with my grandmother, but I didn't know who this lady was particularly, apart from she was my real nan. But it wasn't until 2012 when I actually found my birth father that I realised that that's his mother, and that's me being held by Robert Hichens' daughter. So that's Ivy Hichens. She was born in 1914. So I had been collecting Titanic memorabilia since my early 20s. And I didn't know I was actually related to someone on Titanic till I was in my mid-40s. So it was a bit of an odd sort of situation.
Yeah.
Not only to find that you're related to someone on Titanic, but you happen to be the one that was steering Titanic. So yeah,
Very
it could have been
important
anybody.
guy.
It could have been anybody, but it had to be Robert Hichens.
Of course it did.
Yeah.
So just to clarify then, you are the great-grandson of Quartermaster Robert Hichens.
Yes. In some ways, it was a strange shock, because once you realise you're a relative, then the whole perspective changes. You are still a collector, but it then becomes more personal and more real. You have a responsibility to your family, your responsibility to tell the story and to keep the story alive after that. It was probably from that point I realised that actually people should know who he is, so that people could understand a little bit more about him. Say, if you look at the films, and especially when you see the uncut part of the film,
Come back to the ship! It's our lives now, not theirs.
they are quite harsh on Robert Hichens. And I think particularly, what James Cameron was trying to do probably was to try and put all of the lifeboats into one. So any story that was around the lifeboats would just focus on that lifeboat, which I think he would have been better off not having a specific lifeboat, because obviously there's things that were said on the lifeboat that were never said in that lifeboat. So he became the scapegoat even in that part. So I think he gets quite a lot of bad press because of the film, because I think, if you don't know Robert Hichens, your focus is going to be what you know of him, maybe only in the film. I think the important thing is to realise that he wasn't an angel. He was a seaman. He was quite a rough seaman, if you wanted to call it that way, but he was extremely professional.
Now, a lot of us know the story of Robert Hichens while he was on the Titanic, but I wanted to ask Simon to tell us more about Robert Hichens' early life.
No, he was born in Newlyn in Cornwall. He was born in 1882. He grew up amongst fishing, and his father fished, and he would have gone out and do fishing mackerel, that sort of thing, and herring, and that's what he did until he went into the Royal Navy Reserves, and then went from there and carried on into the Navy, and then just worked his way up. But he'd been a quartermaster probably for about 7 or 8 years before he went on Titanic. So he was 29 when he was on Titanic. So he was a very pinnacle of as a quartermaster, well trained
at the height of his career.
No doubt that's why he was given one of the 6 positions on Titanic. He wouldn't have been just picked out. He would have been chosen because of his skills and qualities.
Now, we often hear that Robert was a quartermaster, but what exactly does that mean? What even is a quartermaster? What are the quartermaster's duties?
I have to admit, it's not an easy thing to try and find out what he did. I think he did various things, which was send messages and did do those sort of things. But obviously his main aim was really to be at the helm. So he would spend 2 hours standing by the side of whoever was at the wheel, which was obviously Oliver before him. Quartermaster Oliver, he was the one that was at the wheel before him, and then he would follow for the next 2 hours, and the next quartermaster would stand by him for that 2 hours. So it was a rota of being at the wheel or being by the side of the wheel and doing any errands that might need to be done. Yeah, or just keeping an eye on making sure that everything was correct where it should be, and probably making sure that the person who's in front of him before him was doing the right thing as well. Just keeping an eye on things.
Now, I want to transport us back to the night of the sinking. So I asked Simon, what were the sequence of events?
I think he came onto into the wheelhouse from 8 till 10. That was the first watch to watch, obviously Oliver before him. And then at 10 o'clock, he took the wheel. He was due to come off at 12 o'clock. That was his finish time. He really just needed another quarter of an hour and he wouldn't have been at the wheel at all. So that's the point. He would have heard the 3 bells from the crow's nest, and then there was obviously the call for him to turn harder starboard. The one thing you have to remember is it's not like driving a car. He would have been in the wheelhouse with all the blinds drawn. So there'd have been no distraction from that. So he wouldn't have seen the iceberg. He wouldn't have seen anything except for the compass, which is what he was supposed to be keeping his eye on. There was nothing more than for him to do. So in some senses, he's very third party in it all. He's sort of put in as the sort of focal point. I've only steered or done this, but to be honest, he had no say in what was being done except for exactly what he was told to do. And he was not going to veer from that, So he was so professional that actually, yes, you could say there are times in the lifeboat that could have been a bit more brave. But when it comes to it, I think even that part of it, the lifeboat, he did exactly what he was asked to do.
Do you know exactly when he was relieved of his duties and what happened next?
Yes, I think it may have been about sort of 10 past 12. I think he was then told to go and release one of the lifeboats off the officers' deck, of officers' quarters, and release them. Once he'd done that, he was then told to take lifeboat 6, which was about 1 o'clock. So I think that was when that was lowered, about 1 o'clock. So it's quite early on in the events of the lifeboats going out. The first thing they were told to do, and that was to row towards a light that they could see. There was a light in the distance that the captain could see and Lightoller could see. And Robert and many others were told to row to that light, get to that boat, let off people onto that boat, and then come back for survivors. That was literally the order. There was no other order apart from that. And there was no. I think in the film it sort of puts over that captain sort of calls back the boats. But if you think about it, Robert went down at 1 o'clock. You're looking at another hour before there was any kind of panic, people in the water particularly. So, you're looking at an hour of Roberts rowing away from the scene in the dark and wanting to aim for this light in the distance, which they just never seemed to get near. So obviously, Molly Brown being in the boat probably didn't do Robert any favours, but I've no doubt that Robert was frightened. I've no doubt that Robert he knew what was going on. He'd been in the wheelhouse hearing all that had gone on. He knew. It's interesting, really, because someone said, well, why didn't he go back, straight away? I once had a chat with David Haseman, who was Edith Haseman's son. I'd had a good chat with him once, and he actually was a quartermaster for years. And I'll put what he said, because it's quite interesting actually, because he said there were three things that were important as a quartermaster that you made sure that the lifeboats did when they left the ship. One of them was suction from the ship going down. So that was one thing that they were really frightened of, that as the ship went down, it would just suck everything down with it. As it was, I think we know pretty much that there wasn't much of a suction with the ship going down in this. But the other thing was that they had to make sure that they were well away from the ship, because people would throw things overboard. You know, deck chairs and bits of wood and doors and all sorts of things would be thrown overboard to make rafts. So those things, you had to make sure you were well away from the ship for that, and also for being swamped by others in the water. You know, if you've got 100 people trying to get on a lifeboat, that lifeboat is not going to stay floating. So David said that to me. He said that there were certain things as a quartermaster you knew you had to do, and certainly going back when the ship is actually sinking would not be something you would aim to do.
Now, this is important to remember. Robert Hichens was given very specific orders to row toward the light. He had a responsibility to those passengers, and he did everything that he felt he needed to do to keep those passengers safe. Oftentimes it seems that the media and the movies only focus on the passengers' perspectives and completely omitted the mindset that Quartermaster Hichens would have been in.
And I think with that, obviously there were certain misdemeanors that he was accused of, like being drunk and all sorts of other things that were sort of pointed towards him. But he was freezing basically because he was standing the whole time at the tiller. He at one point, I think he wanted to help with the rowing, but then found that it wasn't working. I think probably they were just going round and round circles. So he decided he would have to go back and take control of the tiller, which he did, and had to just say to them, they just need to row. Now, whether the first class passengers didn't like the idea of being told what to do, that may have been something. But also he also had, or was given, a teaspoon of whiskey from a flask from one of the lady passengers on the lifeboat, and that was all he was given. And also he was given a blanket just to keep his head warm, which was half wet, half dry, he explains in the inquiry. So really, I think they're sort of almost like a scapegoat. Let's choose Robert Hichens for that, because, you know, but he says even in the inquiry that when they do get to Carpathia, that he made sure that everybody was off before he was. He was the last one to get off. So it wasn't like a mad rush on, I'm getting off the boat before everybody else, pushing people aside. And I think the other thing to remember is that when there were the inquiries, he was never found of any blame in any shape or form. There was no accusations in the inquiry. There was questions asked, which he replied and gave the answers to, but there was nothing in there that then pointed to him as being to blame for anything.
So he wasn't blamed for turning the wrong way, for the sinking, or for his conduct in the lifeboat?
No, not at all. And I think obviously the turning the wrong way is probably a good bookseller for somebody, but it never happened. He's not going to be shouted at, turn a hard starboard and go the wrong way. It just, especially especially when you had another quartermaster standing by, and he would have to repeat it as well. So it wasn't just, oh dear, I've turned it the wrong way sort of idea. So yeah, there are lots of, I don't know, you call them theories and things that go around that make a good story. But I think sometimes we just have to try and look at the bare facts and realise he is a man that struggled afterwards because of all the things that happened. But he, at the time, did exactly what he was asked to do. And maybe he could look back and he may have even thought, oh, maybe I'd have done something slightly different. I mean, the shut the hole in your face.
You don't shut that hole in your face!
Actually happened in Lifeboat 8. So that wasn't even in Lifeboat 6 at all. Yeah, I think it was able-bodied seaman Jones in Lifeboat 8 that said that. So that was reported later as being said there. And it wasn't till after, it was only after Carpathia was actually sighted that the women decided that they wanted to go to Carpathia. And I think he basically, as far as I can gather, he said they weren't coming for us. They're going for the bodies. I mean, obviously, I wasn't there. It may well have been, maybe he thought that actually it was a ship to go and, they were, to a certain extent, they were safe in the boat. Whether he thought they were going to collect people that weren't in a boat, I don't know. So I think you'd probably find that Molly Brown probably took a bit more control at that point. I'm not going to deny that. I think maybe she took control a bit there and said, no, we're going to that boat there. That's to save us. That's where we're going.
Why do you think it is that there was so much focus on this particular lifeboat?
In my opinion, maybe because Molly Brown is quite a well-known character. I think it just happens that Molly Brown was on. I mean, I think Robert once said, of all the boats that she could have been on, why was she on mine? I think because it's been in the film as well, the focus has become Lifeboat 6 over the years, so that has been sort of focused on that and focused on Robert Hichens and then Molly Brown and Margaret Brown. It's sort of that type of thing, maybe more than, whether before that there was any focus on Lifeboat 6 at all, really.
Right. So maybe it's a combination of, high profile passengers and crew. You have Margaret Brown, the first class ladies, and then of course, Quartermaster Hichens, the man at the helm.
It makes a good story. It does make a good story, doesn't it?
Sure does. Now, typically this is where the story of Quartermaster Hichens, as we know it, comes to an end. So I wanted to ask Simon to tell us more about what happened to him after Titanic.
Well, I would say you would probably call it a troubled life, if you wanted to call it that. I might give this a plug, actually. This is a book by Sally Nielsen, who is my cousin. She's a great granddaughter of Robert Hichens, obviously for across the family. So she wrote this book years ago on Robert Hichens, and actually it's a very good book if you want to know more about Robert and maybe his life afterwards and things like that. That is a good book to get hold of if you're really interested. That is a good book. So he continued as a quartermaster. It wasn't as if that was it. He was finished, once he'd come off Titanic, because he then went on to be a quartermaster and first mate and second mate and other things as he went along. He never sort of went down the ranks. He just sort of stayed at that sort of level.
So he was never
but not on ships.
He wasn't exiled or considered a bad omen, as you see sometimes written about.
No, not at all. No, not at all. I mean, he went after Titanic. He went home to Southampton, which where his sort of home is or was. And obviously that's when in 1914 my grandmother was born. It wasn't till in the about 1930 he sort of decided he would settle down a bit. This is where I suppose you could say his life sort of didn't go to plan. He bought a little a boat that he decided that he would do like boat trips. So he moved to Torquay to set up a business. And he borrowed some money from someone to buy a boat. He had money himself and sort of half payment, and then he would pay the other half off over time. But then you had the Depression and all those sort of things happen, and he couldn't afford to pay this man his money for the boat, and so he decided that this man decided he would take back the boat from him. He wasn't interested in waiting for the money, so he just basically confiscated his boat. Didn't give him any time whatsoever, which in Robert's mind he saw that as beyond what was needed. He just wanted him to give him time, and he wouldn't give him any time. So at that point he had no income, and it seems that his wife and children then went back to Southampton, leaving him to basically try and find work, which he talks about walking around for like a couple of years or whatever, trying to find work, but couldn't find any work. And then I think this is when the story of Robert's probably turns very sad. Now, he did suffer from depression. He suffered from PTSD, that sort of post-traumatic stress disorder. So he had all that. He had problems, which I think then he would drink. So he went into drink. And it seems that after that, he decided there was only one answer to that, and that was he decided to get a gun. He would shoot Henley, who's the one who'd taken the boat from him, and then after that, he would shoot himself. And I think that's how he felt, which was a very sad sort of situation for him. So this is what he did. So he went to shoot Henley, but I think he was just so drunk that he basically missed anyway. And I think he caught his ear as he shot him. But then I think Henley hit him, and I think he ran away, fell over, and I think he went to shoot himself, but missed shooting himself as well. So I think then he was arrested and taken. Interestingly, he stood up for, it was obviously attempted murder that he went down for, but the judge actually said that because of his good conduct and because of Titanic and all those things, that he would be lenient. So he received 5 years on the Isle of Wight. Quite a sad story for him. So then from that point on, after he came out of prison, then he went back to Southampton. Now his wife wasn't very well, and I do believe that they were very close. They were very much in love. So they stayed together, and she then became unwell. And on the 23rd of March, 1940, she died. At that point, he went back to sea. He actually then died on the 23rd of September 1940 from a heart failure on what was a ship called the English Trader off the coast of Aberdeen when he went back to sea. So in my mind, I always think of it sort of as a broken heart, literally the same year as his wife died. 23rd of March 1940, he died 23rd of September 1940. So in some sense, quite a sad story. Mm-hmm. He was buried in Aberdeen, unmarked grave, which I was able to work with certain people to manage to get a gravestone placed there for him. So there is one in Aberdeen Cemetery now for Robert Hichens, which I was really pleased to be able to be involved in and get that organised. A sad story, and yet, it's a story of his life.
At this point, I gave Simon the opportunity to clear up any misconceptions the world had about Quartermaster Hichens.
I don't think so. I mean, as far as I know, it would be nice to be him to be thought of rather than a coward, but someone who did their job to the letter, wasn't a perfect man, but in all that he did from the moment that he took the wheel at 10 o'clock right through to when he reached Carpathia at 8 o'clock in the morning, that he did what he did to the letter. That he wasn't perfect, and maybe he did say things that maybe were unadvised at the time, but when all said and done, he did what he did, and he got them all to Carpathia safe and sound, and all off and saved. And then, yes, he went through a harsh life after that, suffering. And obviously many have come back from wars with the same issues and then had to have turned to drink. And that was the story of his life, really. I think doing the journey with Robert, I think for me, not knowing about him till 2012, really, it's been a bit of a journey for me. It's only been, 9 years, I suppose, now that I've even know the name Robert Hichens, but he's become part of my life. And really with the Instagram, with the Facebook, it's to actually put the name of Robert Hichens forward so that more people know about Robert Hichens, but knowing maybe from, as you say, from the right reasons, rather than just what they know from the film or what maybe they can see in a book or whatever, but rather actually realising that the man did what he did as best he could.
But there's a human aspect to it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And Simon, for those who would be more interested in getting to know you a little bit better or getting to hear some other stories, how can they reach out to you? I know you have your Instagram page and your Facebook page. What are those handles?
Yeah, we got Titanic_memorabilia for the Instagram. I try my hardest to answer any, I get quite a lot of messages, and I do my best to answer those as quickly as I can. Obviously, I've got the Titanic Facebook page, Titanic Memorabilia 2, and that one's more. It was designed really for showing memorabilia and bits and pieces, but it's sort of evolved a little bit so that people just talk about Titanic as well. And I've also, I suppose I can give a little plug if that's all right with you. And that's, all I've done is I've done a print of the front cover. My new book comes out in April. That's something I've been working on for about 6 years, and it's called Titanic Day by Day. So it's not on Robert Hichens. I decided that because of Sally Nielsen's book on Titanic, so I don't think there's any point in repeating that. But this is more something that I felt I wanted to do, which was to do with survivors, passengers, crew, the whole lot. So this one is more information and more something you can pick up day by day, as it's mentioned there. So,
Simon, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us. This has been incredible. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything that you want to tell the Titanic community, tell the world about?
I think really, just if you're interested in the Titanic, keep going, keep looking at it, keep learning more. I literally, every time I go onto Instagram or go onto you go on to Rafa's, in YouTube, and you go on to Instagram, there's so much to learn there. I can't keep up with it. Just learn more and enjoy it. And I say, follow Rafa, follow my Instagram page, and just learn more, enjoy it, ask questions.
Beautiful. Simon, thank you so much once again.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
So there you have it, guys. That was the untold story of Quartermaster Robert Hichens. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. I had an incredible time chatting with Simon. We talked about so many different topics. I'm going to be uploading a full version of the interview. There were so many things that we talked about there. I didn't have time to include them in this video, but I will be uploading that version. And that will include the Q&A session where Simon answers the questions that you guys asked. I'm gonna include a link to the full version of the interview here. If it's not up yet when you guys are watching this video, that's because I haven't uploaded it yet, but don't worry, it's coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that you learned something new, and that I gave you something to think about. If you wanna see some more Titanic videos, you guys can watch me debunk some crazy Titanic TikTok conspiracy theories. Click this link here. And if you've ever wondered what would have happened if Titanic hit the iceberg head on, click this video here. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. The link to all the merch is, of course, in the description. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.